Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to another edition of the show. It's episode 346. It is November 8th, 2022, and I'm excited about today's guests. We got a pair of them coming on the show, representing University of Pennsylvania, the PRTC, and at times they probably blend a little bit together. They both have backgrounds in both. So let's not waste any time. Let's bring it on. It's Roger Reina, head coach at University of Pennsylvania, and Brandon Slay at the PRTC, of course, an Olympic gold medalist and 2020. Guys, thanks for joining us. How y'all doing today?
Doing great, Mark. Good to see you.
Doing well, Mark. Thanks.
All right. And Brandon, I know we were just talking briefly, but I want to get back to this story. So you just went to Kazakhstan with Joy McKenna and Tyler Berger, and I've been there once. We were talking. The Worlds were there in 2019 in Astana, Nur-Sultan. Turned back to Astana, but you were in Almaty, which is a capital city. Did you fly there, or did you drive? Once in Kazakhstan to and from wherever you flew to.
So there's the two biggest cities in Kazakhstan are Astana, as you talked about, formerly known as Nur-Sultan, and then Almaty. And so there's no kind of like direct flights from Germany into Taraz city where we wrestled. So it really was an adventure to get there, because we arrived Frankfurt to Almaty, and then Almaty we had to either catch, there's one flight a day, which Joey and Tyler were able to catch on their journey because they left about 5 days before me. But then when I got in, I wasn't able to catch that. So it's a 6 to 7 hour drive from Almaty all the way to Taraz. So it was, and on the way back, all of us had to do the same thing. The tournament was over, and it was over about 5 p.m., so we couldn't catch the flight. So Tyler, Joey, and I, we jumped in a minivan with some guys that didn't speak very good English, and we just kind of hoped that they got us to the airport in Almaty. But thankfully they did, and it was a great trip.
Yeah, I'm curious about the drive. I want to talk about the wrestling too, obviously, but. Is it mountainous? Is it flat? Was it nighttime? Could you even see what the terrain was like? Was there anything around in between these two cities, or is it like barren?
Yeah, so the drive on the way back is that they told us it would take about 5 or 6 hours. And our flight was at 4:40 a.m., which is an adventurous flight time, right?
Yeah.
So we leave from Taraz, and there's definitely mountains, and we just found out it snowed yesterday. So we missed the snow by a couple days. But there are definitely some really high mountains. So we could see those at the beginning of the drive. But then we realized pretty soon that we weren't going to drive straight. We stopped in this little village called Kular, Kular, I think. And one of the wrestlers, he said, "Hey, we need to stop by and see my family."
What?
So we stopped by. They had this big dinner planned, this huge dinner. And we were there for like 2 hours. And I was like, oh, my gosh, hope we don't miss our flight. And Joey's wrestling with some of the kids, and they end up giving me, this big kind of robe, kingly robe to wear. And just their hospitality there is off the charts. Just every single time they bring you into their home, it's always like a 3-course meal, and they definitely honor us as Americans, which is special. But fortunately, I was like, hey, we got to go if we're going to make this flight. And then once we started driving, clear, it was pitch dark, Mark. Yeah. Getting all the way to Almaty, and there was stretches of road where you could go approximately 80 miles an hour on the highway, but then it would be dirt roads for a couple miles, and then you could get going on the highway again. Then there would be dirt roads. So it was definitely, again, I just said it was an adventure. But
yeah.
But we.
So Astana was like a modern city, right? Buildings, electricity, like all pretty much all the modern things you would imagine. What was this little? Well, what was the city you wrestled in like, and what was this little village like? Were they like kind of more desolate and remote and less modern, for a lack of a better word?
Taraz was, I would say, definitely a much smaller town, not as many people, no tall buildings. I think the tallest building I saw there was it might have been one of the churches or mosques. So call it like 3 stories, maybe 3 or 4 stories. So there wasn't a lot of height in the city, and the average, the fans that were coming were just clearly the people there in Taraz, and they were telling me that the average person makes about $200 a month. Wow. So like anytime you gave somebody a tip, it made me think of Cuba a little bit, right? Totally different cultures. But if you're in Cuba, the average person makes $40 a month. So anytime you give somebody, you buy a coffee, right? You give them a couple extra bucks or $5 extra, like it totally makes their day. So big turnout though. We had a lot of fans there, lots of kids, little boys. It's an Islamic culture. So respectfully, there weren't a bunch of little girls in the warm-up area. Wrestling room is all little boys, but there were probably like 50 of them. And every single time Joey and Tyler would wrestle, I mean, they would just surround them, and they would just be, hello, they want to speak English with them. And after every match, they would follow them into the arena. And it was really special. I feel like that's how we were able to really, like, our mission of the PRTC is to enrich lives locally and globally through the sport of wrestling. And I told Joey and Tyler, I said, look, I know that this could be maybe a little stressful here and there with all these kids, but they've never seen an American. And who knows, they may never meet an American, right? So let's just treat them with respect, and let's make sure that we make them feel special. And our guys did a fantastic job of doing that.
That's really cool. It's like a different. You're going to wrestle and win, but the part you stated, right? Part of the mission of the PRTC. That's like a different reason, or a part of your reason for going, which I think is interesting. Were you guys the only Americans there?
Only Americans, Mark, and you kind of know this. You alluded to this, but there's not that many tournaments in Kazakhstan. So I've been coaching freestyle, specific coaching for Team USA since 2009, and during that whole time, the 40 countries I've been to, we'd never been to Kazakhstan. So that was a new experience for us, but it was a great tournament. So it was just filled with wrestlers clearly from Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, Mongolia, Uzbekistan. I mean, it was really mostly all the stans, in Mongolia. So they clearly know how to wrestle. So it was a great tournament. So I was proud of how Joey and Tyler both competed.
Yeah, and just maybe being proud of them, but wins, losses, I think were they maybe second and third. And I saw that picture of you in the robe. P.S. We don't have to tell it, but it was hilarious. But yeah, how did they? Where did they finish? And more importantly, how did they compete?
So both of them made it to the finals, and both of them brought home a silver medal for Team USA and the PRTC. And we'll start with Tyler first because he started wrestling first. But a lot of people don't know this about Tyler, but that was his very first international competition ever.
Okay.
He went overseas with Jordan Burroughs to Serbia as his training partner. But this tournament in Kazakhstan was his very first time to compete for Team USA, like in a tournament like that. So he won his first 4 matches. The wrestler from Kazakhstan he beat in the semifinals was their number 1 guy who wrestled in the world championships for them. So that was a big win for Tyler. And then we went there to wrestle some of the best wrestlers in the world. So Tyler had the wrestler from Kyrgyzstan, Akhmadaliyev, in the finals, and he was silver in the worlds, second in the world in Oslo, and a U23 world champion. And he actually only lost to that Japanese guy who won the worlds this year. He lost to him 10-10. And was beating him. He lost in the last 10 seconds. So that guy is clearly one of the best in the world. And Tyler got ahead 6-2, gave up a couple exposures, which he's going to learn from, but definitely a winnable match. So for him to wrestle him in the finals and have that experience and bring home a silver, I think was fantastic for Tyler. And then for Joey, his first 4 matches, he scored 41 points for and 0 points against. He teched everybody and used a bunch of different scores: high crotch, single legs, whizzer kicks, gut wrenches, laces, just wrestled great. And then he had the wrestler from Mongolia who was 3rd in the world in Oslo. And so, again, great opponent. Guys kind of really short, stayed in a 3-point stance a lot, didn't come out of the stance really at all. And Joey he kind of struggled to open him up and ended up losing 4-2. So he brought home the silver medal. But again, both of them, I thought, learned some fantastic lessons. And I send them all the information, my takeaways, to Coach Bill Zadek, Coach Joe Russell, and I sent that to them yesterday because they're all at the national team camp in Colorado Springs right now. So they can go right from Kazakhstan right into national team camp and start working on these important areas of concentration.
Sure. And I wasn't too clued in that Tyler was even at the PRTC until I just saw them on this tournament. And clearly he was a training partner of Jordan's, and I'm guessing there's some connection there. But when and how did that all take place? Him moving over from, I think it was in California.
Yeah, he was wrestling for the California RTC, and I think the story is the PRTC, we've been had our eyes and heart open to adding another wrestler. And so we were looking at potential 92 kilo, maybe 97 kilo guys. But then when I met with my team and I asked them what they thought, Mark Hall was one of the first persons to speak up, and he said, "Hey, Coach Slay, for me, I would rather have a 92 kilo or 97 kilo. That would be best for me. But Joey's been here longer than all of us, and he wrestles 145, and he always has to wrestle up against Dave McFadden, Jordan Burroughs, and myself. And so I think we should look for somebody for Joey, a 70 kilo." And I was just really impressed with Mark's maturity and kind of selflessness in that.
Yeah.
And the rest of the guys echoed his sentiments. And so then we started pursuing a 70 kilo. And just so happened, we're not, without getting a lot of detail, is that the California RTC, they brought Ryan Deacon in, who's also 70 kilo.
Yeah.
And so Tyler Berger's there at 70 kilo. So it was just we thought an opportunity to call him and see if he'd be willing to look other places. And because of his relationship with Jordan Burroughs, right? Tyler wrestled in Nebraska. Him and Jordan have trained many years together. They have a great bond, that he was willing to come out and visit us and get to know our culture. And so after that visit, I think he was really excited with the opportunity to join the PRTC. So, he joined us in the beginning of September, and his first job was to be Jordan Burroughs' training partner in Serbia. So he went to Germany, went to Serbia, and he got to see the World Championships firsthand, which I think is a fantastic experience for him. And then again, this was his first tournament to compete for the PRTC and first international tournament. So bring home the silver. I'm proud of him.
Yeah, good for him. And like you said, that experience, right? It's not like going to Budapest or somewhere in France. It's like it's a whole different world. So the wrestling on top of the life experience is probably really good for them. I want to talk to Roger too. Now, Brandon's over here doing this international travel with these guys. You're over here on the other side getting the college team ready for the season, right? And I know you had you were a coach for a while, then you weren't. Now you're back to coaching. How much different or similar is what you've done? I don't know, I'm guessing from October through, I guess preseason, right, till now. How much different is it now from early days as a coach and maybe the adjustments you've made?
Yep. Yeah, good question, Mark. Thanks. Our preseason, our guys have been working super hard, and going back to Brandon's teams at Penn, they work super hard too, right? So work ethic is work ethic, and I think that's kind of timeless. I think some of the changes, just as technique kind of cycles through, clearly, there's a lot more scrambling now and ankle passing and, some different things we need to work on, be cautious of, how we're finishing, our leg attacks that way. We're trying to incorporate more sparring and play wrestling, which I think is, kind of trending. We look at the drilling, we look at escalating that into play wrestling, escalating that into sparring and then into live. So I think there's some of that, that's evolving, that's really beneficial, and the guys really like it, right? So, but at the core, Brandon and I have talked about, and we echo with our coaches, throughout our Philly ecosystem here is, we're the caretakers of these guys' dreams, is the way I look at it and the way we look at it. And that's that hasn't changed a bit.
Sure.
Right. So people commit to come here, whether it's our senior guys like, Tyler, who just came on board, or whether it's our college guys that are committing and coming on board. I mean, they're trusting us with their dreams, their careers, and that's every bit the same as it ever was.
Sure. And obviously I haven't been around the Penn program in a deep way, but I do know that a lot of, and maybe this is the play wrestling and sparring is part of this, but I feel like there's also a trend of like, hey, we don't need to go balls to the wall, foot on the gas, like as hard as you can in October and November, where maybe that was the way in the past, and they were either trying to get guys mentally tough or break them or weed out, the guys that don't really want to be there. But maybe in the end, you were like really overworking and overtraining some of the guys that didn't need all this through March. And I'm curious if you guys back off at all at the beginning of the season compared to where you were. Again, I don't know where we were training when Brandon was in school, but I know that's a trend I'm hearing a little bit.
Yeah, yeah, it's really funny you asked that because it's literally like you're reading my mind. This is what I was thinking about driving in this morning, which is I think we're in really good condition. We open up this weekend at the Journeyman Classic, and then we host the PRTC hosting the Keystone Classic here, coming up on the 20th. We had some wrestle offs this past weekend and just evaluating our conditioning. I think we're in really good shape for this time of year. So that's really not a concern. I think we're not wrestling as much live as we were, during Brandon's days on a regular basis. That volume isn't quite as high, but I think the conditioning is where it needs to be. I think our strength training, there's a higher level of science going into the strength training today than there was, 15, 20 years ago. And yet you wonder about this mental toughness piece, right? Which is developed through the grind, right? Are we doing enough of that? Are we going to be mentally prepared? So I feel we are. We've got 10 returning NCAA qualifiers in the program. Last year at this time we had 2, right? So, we're much more experienced, than we were a year ago this time. So that should lend to confidence and mental toughness. So I think we're in a really good position. But yeah, we are, I think, changing with the times, and certainly keen not to overtrain, especially early in the season. But we know, mental toughness in our sport, especially collegiate matches, 7 minutes or longer, is a huge part of it. So I'm really excited. I'm really pleased with our culture, the development of that with the college team and overall. And our guys are really excited. I think we're tired of wrestling each other. We want to go wrestle somebody else, right?
I hear that. There's been a noticeable uptick in the last several years with University of Pennsylvania, the PRTC, you coming back, Roger, Brandon getting involved and bringing all these great athletes and the college team on that upswing as well. And you mentioned went from 2 returning qualifiers to 10. Are you happy with where you guys are and what kind of goals are ahead of you?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I'll speak to the collegiate, side of things. I think we're on track for sure. And we put some pretty aggressive goals, ambitious goals in front of the program. Obviously we were sidelined to 2 NCAA tournaments in a row, right? One which got canceled entirely. And then, the Ivy League presidents coming together and unanimously deciding, not to compete that season. Mark, we were really fortunate in a sense because we were such a young team and such a young program at the time. We had literally 18 guys take a leave of absence from school during the COVID year. And we just, we focused on freestyle and we wrestled a lot of freestyle, between the UWW juniors and the U23s. We had 3 successive top 5 finishes in the nation for the PRTC. So, we started to see that as a leading indicator to college success, producing a lot of All-Americans and quite a number of them in the top 3, at these freestyle nationals. And we love freestyle, right? So it was, in a way, it was kind of cool that, we were able to focus on freestyle for an entire season, as opposed to what typically happens. You come out of the NCAA, championships and you got a few weeks, to get ready for the Open or UWW juniors and, maybe 7 or 8 weeks for the U23s. So we tried to take advantage of that and, kind of, turn lemons into lemonade. And I think our guys did a really remarkable job with that because, last year, this time again, for comparison, our team was unranked, and as we marched through the season last year, we kept climbing. We never dipped lower in the rankings. We just kept climbing higher as the season went on. And, I think Flo had us at 13th at the end of the season in terms of dual meet rankings. And rankings aren't everything, right? We just want to keep getting better faster. But we're starting at a much different position this year with a lot more experience under our belts. And we see some really good teams early in the season. We see a bunch of Big Ten teams. We're going to see Wisconsin in December. We're going to go out to Iowa and wrestle in Carver Hawkeye, at the end of November. And then, the Keystone, which we're hosting here. We've got the traditional teams that have competed. Some of these teams have competed in all 26 of the Keystone Classics, every one of them. And then we've got Arizona State coming in. We've got Virginia Tech coming in. So, we're going to have some really good opportunities early in the season for our guys to test themselves and keep climbing this mountain.
That's great. Brandon, I'm like a lot of people. I want to talk about Jordan Burroughs, right? And yeah, he just won his 7th title, and that's amazing. And there's a whole million directions you go talking about this guy. But I'm curious, like, when you're his coach, and you definitely bring him advice, and with a guy who has so many skills, where do you determine this is what I'm gonna focus on with him, or these are the things he needs to improve on, or however you want to get better at or focus on? Yeah, how do you determine that? I mean, and go about implementing those things, because obviously everybody's got flaws and everybody can get better.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And before I kind of answer that, I think it's just important for your listeners to know and remember that Jordan's first year on the world circuit was 2011, and he ended up a lot of people perceived upsetting Nick Maribel to make the world team that year. And then he went on clearly in the world championships in Istanbul and won his first world title in 2011. But that period of time, I was part of our national coaching staff with Zeke Jones.
Yeah.
I was the assistant national coach. And I share that just to say that it was an honor to be part of, every single one of those world championships or Olympics with Jordan. And I was part of those training camps. I traveled to the world championships, the Olympics in 2012, every world championships, all the way until the Olympics in 2016, which, by the way, I got a chance to experience his success and takeaway from London, and also failure and the takeaways from Rio. So as a coach, I was able to take all that stuff in all those years. So the relationship that I've had with Jordan, it didn't just start, at the PRTC when he showed up here.
Yep, that makes sense.
A couple months before Oslo, in 2021. I mean, that's been going on for a long time. And I think that was a big reason why he trusted us. He trusted me to move to Philadelphia and start training. And I share all that just to say that it's just important to know that relationship was there, because without that relationship being there for all those years, I would say, my ability to coach him and impact him in the ways I'm about to share with you would not be as high.
Sure.
And then when you first get him here, I think the temptation is, if a coach is, my guys hear me say all the time, ego is the enemy, which is actually a great book by Ryan Holiday. It's called Ego is the Enemy. And I think it's tempting to think, oh, I'm Jordan Burroughs' coach now. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. I think it's tempting to maybe, try to put too much on you so you can get props. Yeah. And I try to do the exact opposite. I try to just say, look, I know Jordan. I know how he wrestles. The idea is that you essentially have this Maserati here, right? And it's already running really, really well. So you don't need to come in and change the tires and, put a new engine in it and all that. You don't need to do that. You just need to find some little ways to tweak it to make it run, at a little higher level. And so, my thing for him was that I think, again, you asked me my opinion, but I think his matches against Kyle Dake, and even one of the ones I coached him over in Rome against Chamizo, I think he was really starting to wrestle too forward and backwards. And he wasn't wrestling at angles as much. It was almost like he was just relying solely on his straight shot, a straight double, and he wasn't using his hands. He wasn't being physical enough. He wasn't creating angles as much. And I think that was kind of holding him back. I think you look at his matches against Kyle Dake, it's like he's just chasing Kyle Dake around and just shooting straight shots on him, getting caught underneath, right? One of Kyle's best positions.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think that was what was holding him back a little bit. So what I did is that, as a coach, that I took him and I just said, look, we're going to start working on creating angles better. We're going to look at snap post. We're going to look at snap elbow pass. We're going to start moving the guy's head, arm wrestling his head and putting him at angles, which I say is, we're going to take him to California. We're going to take him to Philly. We're going to take him to California. We're going to take him to Philly, just those angles, right? East and west. And then the better job you do of that, I think then that's going to open up more of your straight shots. So I think being physical with his hands was something we were able to add. And when I say sting him with your hands, and I think he really started doing that. And I think you see the motion that he created the last 2 years, specifically over in Serbia. I mean, if you watched him wrestle, those guys, they were falling all over the place, right? I mean, guys were they were dropping down to all their fours when he would fake. I mean, clearly you saw that one guy from Bulgaria on the edge, do his Michael Jackson kind of interpretation where he was almost falling. And his movement and how he created angles and moved his opponents, I think was stellar in Serbia. And I believe that he scored more points and was more offensive in that World Championships as a 34-year-old than he's ever been, in all of his other World Championships. So, and again, that's not a praise to me. It's really a praise to him that as a 34-year-old, he's still willing, Mark, to get better. He's still willing to be coachable. He's still willing to take wisdom and wise counsel. Because we know in a lot of sports, I watched some other sports interviews with athletes, right? The ego is the enemy. They think you can't teach them anything. They're one of the best. And there's a lot of arrogance that comes from that. But Jordan, Coach Reina can attest to this, is that he's one of the first people to ask questions. You give him advice, he always takes it in. He's just so humble and always wanting to learn more and be a student of the sport. And I think that's why he has 7 gold medals.
And I've seen that, right? And when I'm at training camps and whatnot, he's the last guy in the room, and he was sitting with Manning and Snyder, and now you or Bill or whoever, and you see the wheels turning. And one thing I noticed, and obviously I'm at a small fraction of the workout or training sessions, but the difference from college to international is these college guys are competing, once we start here this week, or it's just like all the time, right? So you're probably wrestling live more often or doing conditioning more often. And I'm thinking about the structure of an RTC practice, or even, maybe it's more individualized for a guy like Jordan, who's 34, 35 versus a Tyler Berger or somebody who's a lot younger. So I'm curious, how much time Jordan spends working these tactics or techniques versus like hard training, whether it's to get ready for a competition or just because he doesn't need the miles anymore because the tires at some point are going to get worn out.
Well, I would say I don't necessarily train Jordan so much. I don't train him that much differently than the rest of our guys.
Sure.
But I would say in general, freestyle parterre is important. So Mondays we spend a lot of time at parterre, a lot of time in live parterre, takedown to turn, which in my opinion, I learned this from Dave Schultz. Through Coach Reina, that as he got older in his career, parterre became a lot more important in the game, right? It's a lot easier to take a guy down and turn him a couple times than have to get 4 or 5 takedowns.
Yeah. So
that's another thing as a coach with Jordan, is that we're going to spend a lot of time helping him become more dangerous in parterre. And you saw that he almost had that takedown to Lace in the finals against the Iranian. You saw he was working hard to thread it. He almost had it, and if he would have gotten that, he would have teched the guy. But we spend a lot of time in parterre on Mondays. Tuesdays, we typically is probably, I would say, our hardest day wrestling live, because we take Wednesdays off, totally off. It's recovery day. Thursdays, we do mostly sparring in areas of concentration that are important to each specific guy. And then Fridays is match day. So, and that doesn't change, that much. That's in many ways, that was the schedule that I was on when I was training for the Olympics, when Kevin Jackson was my coach. So I think these guys, they don't need to be on the mat 5 or 6 times a week. If you're an 18-year-old, 19-year-old, you're a college wrestler, your body can handle that. College wrestling matches last a lot longer. We know freestyle matches will never last more than 6 minutes.
Right.
So in many ways, I feel my job is to coach these guys to be more quarter horses, and college coaches in general, they're coaching their guys to be more thoroughbreds. And I think you have to manage those 2 types of horses accordingly. And I think Jordan's enjoyed, not just Jordan, I think the rest of our guys, Joey McKenna, Tyler Berger, Dave McFadden, Mark Hall, and Jordan, I think they've really enjoyed, that system.
Sure. Roger, the Keystone Classic's coming up. I think you said the 23rd or 26th year. Why is this important for you guys to have an early season tournament? Why do you like to continue to have this event?
Yeah, it's an event I think that we've celebrated for obviously quite a number of years, 26 years. And we created the event to be able to host our own tournament. It's a great opportunity for all our families, to come together. Mark, particularly, the families of the freshmen that come in for the first time to see their kids compete. The Palestra is a really exciting place to compete. It's it goes all the way back. Greek word, means house of wrestling. It's something that's very special here as an arena, in our region. And so to have all of the guys on our team compete, because we're not traveling, we got no travel squad limitation, so every single guy on our team gets to compete, and all those families and parents get to come together. They have a lot of fun. We're really thankful of our parents. They run what we think is the best hospitality room of any tournament in the country. So everybody eats well, but we share this community, right, for the first time, for so many parents coming in and meeting the returning parents. And so that's a big part of it. And for us too, to host, something here in the Palestra, it's really special, this college tournament. But, we've hosted many conference championships, EIWA championships. We've hosted 3 of the college all-star meets, and setting record attendance, along the way, which has since been broken, but that's great. We hosted the world team trials twice in freestyle at the senior level. We hosted the Olympic team trials in freestyle. I mean, it's been a place that's hosted some major wrestling events over the years. So, we're hosting the EIWA championships again this March in the Palestra. So really exciting. All those returning NCAA qualifiers knowing they're going to compete, at home, and then, and then bringing the NCAA championships, the D1 championships here to Philadelphia in 2025. So, so it's about celebrating our college community and getting everybody on the mats, to wear the red and blue, but it's also, about bringing another major wrestling event, here to the Philadelphia region as well.
Yeah. And Palestra, meaning House of Wrestling. There's only, there's a statue of Gable outside of Carver, Gallagher was a wrestler. I'm probably missing maybe 1 or 2, maybe not, where there's an actual arena like somehow attached to wrestling. How did that come to be, where the arena or that building on your campus is called the Palestra, the House of Wrestling? Where'd that come from?
It's a Greek word, referencing arenas. So it was built in 1926, and at the time was one of the largest indoor arenas in the world. Seats 8,800 people, almost 9,000 people. It was also one of the first where the architects came in and built an arena with unobstructed views. And interestingly, it was the same architecture firm, that some years later went up and built a very similar shaped arena in State College, called Rec Hall. Same architects, right?
Really?
So at the time, it was a very innovative arena that they reached back into, the Olympic ancient games of Greece and named it the Palestra. So Brandon wrestled there quite a bit of times. It's how would you describe it, Brandon? It's a echo chamber, some would say. The acoustics are unique. How do you describe it to the fans?
I just always saw it as a very historic arena. Coach, when I wrestled, you were my coach at Penn. Mark, you can run around the arena. There's like a cement floor. So we used to do a lot of conditioning, running, inside around the arena. And then coach would run us up and down the stairs inside the arena. So we ran around it for conditioning. We ran up and down the stairs inside of it, all for preparation to maximize our ability to wrestle in it. Once we had a dual meet or once we had the EIWA championship. So I think it's one of the most special arenas to wrestle in the whole entire country. So, we look forward to having the Keystone Classic here November 20th.
Yeah, and now that you talk about I think the architect who did that, and then Rec Hall, and that, like, now I think about them, I'm like, yeah, they are similar. They're these concrete floors with like not the stairs you sit, not the steps you sit on, but the steps you go up are like concrete and similar. So I see the similarities now, and I I obviously haven't been to all the events you guys mentioned, but I've been to the EIWAs, I've been to the All-Star, I've been to Penn events, and thinking about the All-Star, which is back, what were your guys' memories of the All-Star back in, I don't know, the 70s, 80s, 90s, and how prestigious it was until it went away in, like, I think it was 2018.
Yeah, I think we hosted it, in the late 80s and the early 90s twice, kind of relatively quickly back to back. And then we hosted again in 2014. And for us, like when you think about this, this region of the country, Mark, where, we've got the largest youth league in the country, the ICWL. It's called the Inter-County Wrestling League out here in the Philadelphia suburbs. We've just got thousands and thousands of, youth wrestlers and their parents and their coaches, and then middle school wrestlers and high school wrestlers, and, more Division I programs collegiately in Pennsylvania than any other state. And, the highest density of RTCs in this region as well. Right. So, at every level of wrestling, it's just rich with wrestling fans. And so, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, when you do, you guys do that heat map of where do the NCAA Division I qualifiers come from, like we know they're right here in our backyard. So, it's connecting, the opportunity to come watch really high level wrestling with this surrounding community, and they're eager for it. Right. And knowledgeable fans. And so, all those events I think are great ones. I love the All-Star Meet. I think the NWCA, doing so much to serve the sport of wrestling, bringing that meet back, I think is a really great thing. I think it's a really special, opportunity. Brandon wrestled in it himself, really good match, important match against Jeff Catrabone of Michigan back in the day. I think that was up in Buffalo, if I remember right.
That's right. Good memory, Coach.
And so I think it's a special event. I think it's an event that the athletes and the coaches involved with it look back and really realize, hey, that's a marquee opportunity.
Yeah. And tell me about that match, Brandon, in 1998. If I'm just going off memory here, maybe February 2nd in Buffalo, attendance right around 3,300. Not reading off of a sheet or anything now.
Yeah, I had Jeff Catrabone, who is since he's a great buddy of mine. Now when we see each other, it's just great memories. But I wrestled him the first time in the NCAAs the year before, in 1997 in Cedar Falls, Iowa. I had him in the quarterfinals. So Penn hadn't had an All-American since 1966, and here's this match. If I beat Jeff Catrabone, then that drought will be over. And so to add some more intensity to it, and we were tied and we went to overtime. So sudden victory, first takedown wins. And I'm sure Coach, he may have been more nervous than me that match, just because so much was really on the line. And I got him to reach. He came out of position. I hit him with the double leg. I took him down and won that match and humbly became Penn's first All-American in a long time. End up finishing second in that tournament. And then going in to the next year, that All-Star tournament, is that I was really excited that I was going to get a chance to wrestle Joe Williams. So it was marketed Joe Williams, Brandon Slay, All-Star duel. I prepared for Joe Williams. I was ready to go wrestle him, beat him. And then it might've been like a week or so he pulled out. So they inserted Jeff Catrabone, in. So here came down to it. And we had another close match again. There was about maybe 15 seconds left, and I had to get a takedown to win. And I got him to reach again. I double-legged him again, so to take him down and beat him. So we had some great matches.
I feel like I've seen you hit a double leg once or twice before.
The key against Catrabone, I always tell people he's one of the best riders that I've ever seen in college wrestling. That my senior year in college, he rode out Joe Williams the whole 2 minutes. At the NCAA tournament, just phenomenal on top. So the key to beating Jeff Catrabone was always if you could get out. If you could get out from him, you had a chance to beat him. But if you couldn't, it was a challenge. So being able to escape him was the key to being able to beat him.
Sure. Gosh, so there was a drought from a 30-year drought, roughly, with no All-Americans. And
I think it was 1966, and Coach will know this better, but it was 1966, I believe, to 1997. Mark, I think that was the difference.
Okay, yeah, just over 30 years. Either of you, did you think you'd be in the position you're in today, considering where you were at that time, where it was like an All-American is like unheard of in the last 2 or 3 decades, to now where you're thriving, the best wrestler on the planet's at training in your room, and you have 10 NCAA qualifiers in the lineup. Are you surprised that you guys are in this position now, considering where you were then?
Well, I'll go ahead and start, Brandon, and kick it to you. And but for us, Mark, our program went through a time, like a lot of programs, which was really challenged in its existence. I was a sophomore on the team, and our athletic director, brought us in, and we were really wondering if wrestling was going to continue at all. And so this was back in the 80s, and I think kind of the first wave of the unintended consequences of Title IX, and a lot of people didn't really understand what was happening at the time and what the issues were. But fortunately, we've got this, long list of alumni. The very first collegiate tournament, a lot of people don't know this, but the very first college tournament ever was held on the University's Pennsylvania's campus, right? 1905, the precursor of the EIWA. So we've got this tremendous history. We're in this tremendous hotbed. And our alumni really stepped up at that time. And the program was maintained, and then I had the opportunity to take it over at a really young age, 24 years old, and at the time had no fear, which was great, but also had no idea what I was doing, which wasn't great.
Yeah.
So truth be known, there was a lot of learning on the job, and then we had an opportunity, with Foxcatcher starting out here, to start meeting some of these top wrestlers in the world. So you talk about, best wrestler in the world right now here in our backyard. Well, one of the reasons Brandon came to Penn is we had Dave Schultz in our backyard here, a great friend and incredible technician, brilliant, genius. And we had a lot of those guys to learn from, Jim Humphrey and Brian Dolph and Dan Shade. And, it kind of had an RTC thing going before there were RTCs, really. And that, was kind of Foxcatcher. And then, when that ended tragically, and our wrestling community, we all friends, still suffer from, and Nancy and her kids, and yet the wrestling community rallied in a way that is just remarkable, and those within the community know the fabric of it. We came together and formed the Dave Schultz Wrestling Club, and then for 3 Olympiads, including Brandon's trip to Sydney, where there were 3 Dave Schultz Wrestling Club guys on that Olympic team, with Kerry Colott and Heath Sims and Brandon. And so, I think along the way, the journey from my perspective was what if we don't limit ourselves? What can we accomplish if we don't put any limits on ourselves? And our program back then, Brandon, blazing trail on it, we broke into the top 20, and then the top 15, and then the top 10 in the nation. And, when Brandon broke through, I think it led to, kind of the dam breaking, so to speak.
Yeah.
Where other guys who were doing the same things he's doing in the training room were like, wait a minute, like he's doing it, I can do it. And then, literally we had multiple All-Americans on a regular basis, over a period of time. And, for me, when I stepped down in 2005, I was in my early 40s. I was just, focused on my kids, and I felt this chapter of my life professionally had been completed and closed. And, I never anticipated, being in a position to come back and take the program over. And so I'm surprised to be in this position in a way. And yet I've never been more excited. Like what we have built here, and many people have put together, this Philadelphia wrestling ecosystem is absolutely phenomenal. And it's multifaceted. I'll let Brandon speak a little bit more about kind of the leaders involved with that. But when I got asked to consider, coming back and taking the program back over, was to be able to work with Brandon on a daily basis as he was running the RTC, and Matt Valenti, who wrestled here at Penn. I recruited him, and now he's my boss, right? Overseeing the sport of wrestling. I mean, I'll let Brandon speak to it, but it's just this moment in time that it just seems to be like incredibly special. And so I'm just really grateful that we have the chance to work together. But Brandon, let me let you take it from here.
Yeah, I would echo those things that Coach said. And you asked, Mark, is this kind of what you thought would happen? And in many ways, you kind of asked, was this the plan?
Yeah.
And I would say, when I chose to come to Penn, I wasn't necessarily shocked because, becoming second in the nation per se. And I say this humbly because that was the goal. The goal was to be the national champion, right? But the goal was to become a national champion, All-American. And so, when that happened, my junior year, that was part of the plan. And, when Coach recruited me, I knew at the time Penn was one of the top universities in the nation. Wharton School of Business was the #1 undergraduate business school in the country. That was really appealing to me,
Sure.
which is why I chose Penn. Yes, I had the opportunity to come out and train with Dave Schultz on a frequent basis. Phenomenal opportunity. But people at the time were like, well, Brandon, University of Pennsylvania, I mean, they're not even the top 40 in the country. Like, why would you choose to go wrestle for that college team? And because Coach Reina, though, he had a vision, and he wanted and planned for Penn to be one of the top teams in the country. And I believed in that vision. And so for that to start happening, that was part of the plan. And I think for me, one of the most rewarding things, there's lots of rewarding things, but after I graduated, to look back and cheer for Penn Wrestling. And I know when I got done that next year, they had 3 All-Americans in 1999. And then in 2000, Brett Matter goes and wins the NCAA championship, right? It went from not having an All-American in over 30 years to now Brett Matter's the national champion. That to me warms my heart, because that's a huge team effort. That's a huge community effort. And we know that community matters. And so that was the plan back then. And I think for now, with Coach Reina coming back, once he made that decision to do that, and then once I made the decision to move my family from Colorado Springs, Colorado, to run the PRTC, I mean, the plan is, I mean, we didn't choose, as Coach always says, we didn't choose RTC light. Like, if we're going to choose to build this RTC, like, we're going to go big, and we're going to try to build one of the best RTCs in the whole entire country, as connected to 2 Division I programs that with Penn and Drexel are choosing to try to build some of the top teams in the country. So, having these guys choose the PRTC, I would say it's been, again, humbly, it's been part of the plan. And we're just in this next phase. Originally when I took the job, there was Richard Perry. When I showed up in Philly, he was the only senior level athlete we had. So we added in weight class order BJ Futrell, Chase Pammy, and Dan Valmont, and then there was Richard Perry. So that was the first 4, kind of called the first original, like, 4 horsemen, that I was coaching. And as they kind of retired and moved on, then clearly the next phase was we had Joey McKenna, and then Dave McFadden joined us, and then Mark Hall joined us, and then Jordan Burroughs joined us, right? And then now we have Tyler Berger. So, right now we have 5 full-time senior level athletes, and the plan is to continue to grow, to continue to expand, to continue to have more success on the mat. But I would say, Mark, most importantly for us is to continue to grow our culture, which is genuinely caring for each other, which is living out our values of faith over fear, full effort, struggle and willingness to serve others. And our guys are doing that. And I think if any, Mark, you spend time with our guys, you hear our guys talk, you see how they act, they live those values out. And I'm proud of who they are as men.
Absolutely. You guys are doing a phenomenal job in that front. And you went from Richard Perry, then you had the 3 guys, and then they kind of move on, and now you're up to 5. Is there a goal in sight, or is it just to grow it? Is it we want 10 guys or 15 or however many, or is it like, hey, we're just trying to accomplish these things and the number of guys isn't as important?
No, I would say the exact number per se. It's not like our goal is like, oh, we want 10 guys. It's more of, I would like to have a guy at each of the Olympic weight classes, which, I mean, right now, unfortunately, there's only 6.
Right.
I mean, we know that there needs to be more weight classes, but we would like to have a guy at each Olympic weight class. I mean, right now we're definitely would like to add another, a big guy at 92 or 97 kilo. Would probably be the next weight class. It's not a shock that we would go and look for potentially a 57 kilo, but having multiple, guys on the team that represent all the Olympic weight classes, that's important to me. But again, more importantly than that is the culture. And the leaders in our board keep telling me over and over and over, Brandon, the most valuable thing that the PRTC has right now is the culture. And so we're not just going to add a guy just to add a guy. If they don't fit that culture, Mark, we're not adding anybody, because I mean, right now that's the most valuable thing we have. And so we're not going to add anybody unless we know that they're going to fit our values and they're going to fit our culture. Sure.
And PRTC's, I don't know if they're sponsoring or putting on the Keystone Classic, it's run by. And what does that mean? Is you guys organizing it and helping get the table workers and everything else? And I know there's a collaboration between the college programs and the RTC, but I was just curious what that entails.
Yeah, I mean, I'll take that one. This was the very first time marked at the PRTC that we're going to take over the Keystone Classic.
Okay.
And by the way, we're just really excited that Flow is going to stream this tournament. And we just believe that there's going to be a lot of people watching this event. As Coach mentioned earlier, to have Virginia Tech, Arizona State, coming to this event, there's going to be 3 of the top teams in the whole entire country. They're competing there. In addition, including to Drexel and Duke and Harvard, and as Coach mentioned, right, some of the teams that were there from the very beginning, 25 years ago, are competing. And I wrestled in the very first Keystone Classic, and Coach started the Keystone Classic, and we kind of laugh because I remember at that very first tournament, I said, Coach, I remember thinking, like, you haven't even had this tournament yet, and you're already calling it a classic. Right? And so he is prophetic, because here we are. We're about to have the 26th annual Keystone Classic. And the PRTC, we took it over, Mark, because we just we believed that this was an opportunity for us to diversify our revenue and potentially make the tournament even better, in all due respect to the people who've run it in the past. But for us to use our community and use our platform to get the word out, to hopefully maximize ticket sales, because all the revenue generated will go to our Olympic Training Center. We'll help fund Joey McKenna, Tyler Berger, Dave McFadden, Jordan Burroughs, and Mark Hall, and potentially adding more athletes down the road. So, we're just really blessed that we have some really generous donors supporting the PRTC. But I wanted to be able to go to those donors and say that, hey, we're not just expecting donations, that we're going to step out in faith, and we're going to try to diversify the way that we bring in revenue for this RTC. And so the Keystone Classic, hosting that, running that for the first time this year, that's our way of doing that.
So if somebody's in the Philly area or close enough, and they do want to buy tickets, which is important to you guys, how can they get some tickets to the to the Keystone Classic?
Coach, you can take that one.
Yeah, we posted, both on, Penn Athletics, Penn Wrestling's page on Penn Athletics, Mark, the ticket sales link, and it's also on the PRTC site, which is PennsylvaniaRTC.org. And, we take walk-ups too. People can save money, obviously, by, getting their tickets online in advance and save time. So we encourage that. I think it's going to be a tremendously exciting event. With our team, our returning NCAA qualifiers taking the mat at home for the first time. We got Arizona State coming in, Zeke Jones coming in, and Zeke was the head coach at Penn for 3 years after I stepped down in my previous stint. So that's going to be cool to have Zeke back in the house, and Virginia Tech coming up. Tony Roby's team's always tough. Plus this traditional returning field with Appalachian State and Duke and Harvard and Rider University, and as Brandon mentioned, many of these teams have been here all 26 straight. Coming back saying, hey, as long as you'll have us, we'll keep coming back. And that's the kind of tournament we want to run. And but just to celebrate this with our surrounding community is something really important to us. And 6 mats running at the same time, streamed on Flow. I think it's going to be a tremendously exciting day. It's Sunday, November 20th.
Awesome. Well, hopefully people in the area can get a cheesesteak and make their way over to the Palestra, because it's an awesome place to see wrestling event. I've been to several there. It's the House of Wrestling, I think you said it was, which is awesome. And I just really hope you guys are the best, and I hope a ton of people show up. And the fact that there's a good amount of teams that have been there every year for 26 years, you don't see that hardly ever. So I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, one thing, Mark, too, that I wanted to share, this is really exciting. I'm just thankful that Jordan is willing to do this, but every single person that has a ticket to the Keystone, he's going to be doing a clinic that day at 11 a.m. So for all the youth wrestlers, middle school wrestlers, high school wrestlers, if you have a ticket to the Keystone Classic, you're going to be able to come and listen to Jordan Burroughs teach wrestling and speak for an hour and a half, which a lot of kids don't get that opportunity. So I would say definitely come and watch some great college wrestling, but also come and learn from one of the best wrestlers of all time. And I just want to thank be able to make that possible. Like Rudis is our tournament sponsor. And so for Rudis to be able to sponsor the Keystone Classic and create this opportunity for Jordan to impact, these kids' lives in a positive way, we're really, really thankful for that.
And as important as learning wrestling moves in, I also know what kids like. They can get autographs and selfies afterwards, I'm assuming, right?
Jordan is always very,
He's amazing.
very willing to do that.
Super gracious with his time. He's
Mhm.
one of the best we've ever had on the mat and off, with everything that entails. So,
Sure.
you guys got a win. You got a winning solution, top to bottom, left to right, and I love what you guys are doing and the culture you've created over there. And really, we're running right at an hour. So I'll give either of you guys kind of the final word to say anything you might want to say about anything. But then we'll let you move on with your day.
Go ahead, Coach. You have anything?
Yeah, I just appreciate the opportunity to share this with the folks listening on Flow, and again to stream this out on Flow, as well as people to see it in person and kick off the early part of the NCAA season with what we feel is one of the best tournaments in the East. Is just really exciting. I'll point to one thing here, and Brandon mentioned it very early. I'll close with this: is the mission of the PRTC, is to positively impact lives both locally and globally. So here's Brandon just back from Kazakhstan with Tyler and Joey, and those kids surrounding these Americans they've never seen an American before. And here, like a couple weeks later, we're rallying the Beat the Streets kids in Philly and all the surrounding wrestling community locally, right? So, it's not just talk or, words on a board, right? I mean, we're living it. And that's what we want to do with our values. So I'll just close with that.
Yeah, and I'll just say, Mark, this, these RTCs, they're all nonprofits. And the only ways they survive are generous donors commit to funding the mission and values of these regional training centers. And for us, we have the ambassador campaign, which I believe all of our guys are ambassadors, representatives at the highest level. And, we have a campaign going on where we're trying to raise, extra $1 million over the next year and a half, and additional dollars so we can potentially add more guys. So we continue to grow. Like you asked me, we want to grow. That growth only comes from support, adding more guys, traveling around the world. We can't go to Kazakhstan and do the things we love to do, without support. So our ambassador campaign, if you want to learn more about that's on our front page of PennsylvaniaRTC.org. And so we really appreciate people considering supporting our mission and values.
All right, check it out, PennsylvaniaRTC.org. Coach Reina, Coach Slay, really appreciate you guys coming on. Continued success with everything you're doing at the University of Pennsylvania and the Pennsylvania RTC.
Thanks, Mark.
All right, guys, thanks so much. Have a great day.
Thanks, Mark. Have a good day.
All right, you too. All right, folks, another awesome show. Really covered a lot of ground there from Kazakhstan to Pennsylvania and all across the world, and the Palestra. Really excited for their event, the Keystone Classic. That comes up on November 20th. You can get tickets at PennsylvaniaRTC.org, and you can catch all the action live right here on FloWrestling. That's going to do it for today's show. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time.